Kamailio project, the last year in review. We can discuss it during Ask Me Anything or tomorrow if you need more details about some of the features. I'll try to present as many details as I can during this presentation, but actually it happened to be a lot of contributions during the last year. Even many of us had let's say a busier time due to pandemic, taking care of the family or working from home or needing to do other type of activities to accommodate better during this time. Short presentation about myself. Being a live event can be watched later, and newcomers to Kamailio my want to learn a bit about myself. So I'm originally from Romania, living for a very, very long time in Berlin. I came here initially as a researcher at Fraunhofer Focus Institute, where this project started 20 years ago on Friday, and will be exactly the day 20 years ago. With the first commit, the project was then released open source and got in the hands of the community due to some other events. I'll have a short history soon. Otherwise, I'm practically a programmer or software engineer. I'm not coming from the telecom world. I'm coming from the computer science world. And this project, it's more or less what I've been doing for the past also almost 20 years myself, on various roles. First time as a researcher, then as a developer and part of the community, bringing this project further. Then the main timelines, as this project started with the name SIP Express Router at the Research Institute. The institute sold the IPR, the intellectual property rights, the license to a US company in 2005, and OpenACR project was created. And in 2008, due to a trademark issue, we had to rename it again to Kamailio. From that moment, we use this name. A more detailed timeline for the project. Practically for about 1 year, it was developed in-house at the research institute. Then it was released open source and continue for a few years, becoming pretty popular under umbrella of the Fraunhofer Focus Institute. In 2005, again, they decided to sell the rights on the project, but being already open source, several developers could continue with the open source branch by naming it OpenACR. In 2008, it was a decision to actually try to collaborate again. The guys from the original SIP Express Router project, they were still pushing code mainly to scalability of the core, like transport layer with asynchronous support, better TLS implementation, and so on. While OpenACR was focusing more on like business feature, list code routing, load balancing, resonance extensions, and so on. Initially, it was more like, let's bring the core of the application together and have sort of two projects with independent release policies. But after a while, as Kamailio project was more active and doing periodic releases. The decision was to go for Kamailio only as a name and project to avoid confusion of newcomers that could see, okay, there is a project from where you can build 2 application names and so on. And practically from 2012, we switch everything to a single project, and we released the first version under a single name on March 2013, practically the version 4.0.0. The latest version now it's 5.5.2, so it's in the 5.5 series, released this summer. Across these years, we also got some awards for the project, like Best Open Source Networking Software by the InfoWorld in USA, or award from the Internet Telephony Service Provider Association from UK. Also at a couple of events, we got awards like SimCon awards for Kamailio contribution to the open source real-time communication space. Back to Kamailio after this history, so hopefully now it's a bit more clear for newcomers that look at the project and they see different names on maybe all documentation. I'm starting with the version 5.4, which is the previous stable release. It's still maintained as the project. We maintained the last 2 stable branches. It was released last year, but as I'm trying to cover and do a summary, worth mentioning here. Among the main new features, there were a couple of modules. Kafka connector could be useful for those leveraging their infrastructure on the Kafka messaging system. Implementation of the stir shaken with the SecSip ID module. That was the first implementation in our project, and I know it's rolling out in USA these days, or it's already out for a couple of weeks, months. A new module for tracking dialogues in a stateless mode, mainly for the statistics, so not like call control, which is provided by the old dialog module. It's mainly to see how many active calls in a rough estimation, you know, to see if it's time to increase the capacity or to be able to shut down if it's like a maintenance mode. There is no active calls in that system. And you're also suitable for lightweight deployments such as edge proxy load balancer, so where you don't really want to be a full call control dialog stateful instance. Management of the headers with variables got an improvement, more flexibility with PV headers, and a module to facilitate integration with systemd. Obviously, there are a lot of features. It's only like a summary list I picked up in that major branch in 5.4. Quite useful for monitoring. It's the new custom log engine, which allows pushing logs in JSON format, facilitating integration with Elk stack with this Elasticsearch based system. So searching on logs, it's somehow better with this option, which is a command line to turn it on. Quite useful, and I use it a lot, is the option to load the modules and set module parameters via command line, especially for deployments in containers, like with Docker, where you can take these values from environment variables, and you don't need to like MySQL password or whatever to put it in the configuration file, or you don't know, like some IP addresses at the time where the image is created and you want to pass it as option. Associating names to listen socket, it's something I find also useful when you have a like active standby or active deployment, because you can associate the interface with the name, and based on the name you can force the socket, like the first, the second interface. In like distributed deployments, farms of Kamailios, you can have these routing rules to bridge between networks, now on interface name, not on IP address. That could be different in some cases. Quite requested before, it was ability to do keep alive for all registered users, to send like options to all the contacts, and also get the round trip time, so you can have like a statistics of the delay between the server and endpoints. Typically, with every new major release comes a set of new variables and transformations for Kamailio configuration file. Ability to insert the DNS records in cache at startup. So no need to do DNS queries for the domains maybe that are in your core network or with the partners you work most of with. A new set of functions to encode, decode the contact addresses and hide the original one. Sometimes I found problems with some PBXs when the endpoint was connected to Kamailio as an edge proxy over TLS and then sending to the PBX. The PBX was rejecting because of seeing like transport TLS and was not supporting, although we had the record route and so on, pointing to UDP. With this one, you can trick such systems and show as being Kamailio in the contact or something like that. In memory only mode for representative records, another requested features, as DMQ can propagate the states, or you can use like PUA, JSON. There was no need to actually store it to a database, as a node coming up can get the data from the other nodes. TLS was quite a lot of work during the past years, not only the last one, to adjust it and tune it for the latest libSSL and bring the variables and new attributes from the certificates up to date. SIP-trace got more flexibility for monitoring what should be sent or not to Homer SIP capture, and you have now event routes where you can have conditions what to send or not, to skip sending. So you can do if it's met on the option, don't mirror it because it's likely keep alive from the endpoints. SIP dump also got more flexibility by this event routes. This is an alternative to the SIP trace and the SIP capture project, targeting small deployments or testing phase where you want the TLS traffic to be somehow visible to you as admin of the system. So the SIP dump can write the traffic on local files and then do rotation, can write also a metadata file to say the role of the Kamailio processes when it started and so on. Then the latest stable version now, it's 5.5.0, the one released just before this summer, came again with a set of new modules. As worker, like specialized worker, this is something that you may want to look at if you want to distribute the traffic to different workers in a pre-processing phase. So before getting to request route in our Kamailio configuration file, you can decide which worker should process it, like which Kamailio process. You can create group of workers, so you specify which group name should handle that. So you have also parallel processing. And then the traffic is moved somehow to that pool of workers, and one of them will choose it and will run the request route. So this is pre-request route or reply route selection of the worker process. One very useful case would be when you have like a single TLS connection between two Kamailios, and that can get busy. You can distribute the traffic on that connection to different workers, because by default it's a TCP TLS worker that gets the traffic and try to consume it. But SIP specs don't or they decouple the transport layer from the SIP user identity layer. So all the traffic between two nodes would be using the same TLS connection, even would be traffic from different endpoints, like between edge proxy and the main SIP server. So look at it, could be like the foundation for a new design that we somehow discussed at our last developer meeting in Düsseldorf 2 years ago or so, when we were looking at variants to improve use of Kamailio worker processes for handling all the traffic and not necessarily have it for a specific transport layer. Now it's a module, but can evolve when we get the next chance to discuss and design it properly as part of the core. JSON Web Token generation and validation, especially if you work with WebRTC or integrate with web services, could be useful. A second implementation for stir-shaken, this time using lib-stir-shaken instead of lib-sexzipid. Check it and choose which one suits better your needs. WebSocket client, using lib-WebSocket client library, but as a connector to external system, not as transport layer for SIP traffic. This we support as a server, so you can connect WebRTC endpoints to Kamailio directly. No problem, we have that for many years. This is if you need like doing API request over WebSocket to another system from Kamailio config file, and actually it's used, for example, by the RTP engine module to do control operations over RTP engine application over WebSocket, which is supported now by RTP engine application instead of the classic UDP control socket. And this could help when you deal again with WebRTC and SDP that needs to be sent to RTP engine. It's quite large and you face problems with UDP transmission, I don't know, due to firewall or whatever fragmentation you may see in your network. A new RTP relay module using also kernel forwarding, LRK proxy, lightweight RTP kernel proxy. Check it, maybe if you need to just pass a lot of packets left and right for your streams, could be an options. RTP engine is known also to be very scalable and has a high capacity for relaying session. But we are an open project. If a developer comes with an extension, we are happy to accept it as long as he wants to maintain it. And then a split from the SecCPID module to have the process-specific API in own module, not to face the known issue with multi-threading and forking processes. As Kamailio, it's a multi-process forking application. It's known that forking while multi-thread libraries initialized could have unpredictable behavior. So this we will probably need to check also with some other libraries, maybe libcurl or libmysql. As I noticed, they introduce threads for some of their internal processing. Lot of other features to existing components. zipdump has now the ability to store the traffic in pickup file. So if it's like TLS, traffic will get it also in pickup, not only text file. And it will show like a UDP transport layer because it was easier, simpler to implement in the first phase, but you'll have some meta headers to say exactly, oh, this was incoming over TCP TLS and going over other transport layer, whatever. And now it's easier to look at the traffic with ngrep, sngrep to have this kind of diagram in the terminal. DMQ, or distributed message queue system, got also the improvements to support more transport layer, not only UDP. So especially useful for cloud deployments where you want to keep privacy encrypted traffic between the nodes. New routing algorithms for dispatcher, IMS, voice over LTE extension got, again, many enhancements, IPsec communication, and so on. Again, new classes of variables and transformation. One of them, again, for container-based deployments, you can get define from the environment variables. You can get a defined value as a variable, and you can pass it to other functions. Lost improvements, and we'll have Wolfgang presenting about this extension for next generation emergency services just after me. So if you are interested on that, stay around. We'll start in like 5-10 minutes, the next presentation. SecCPID got many enhancements. As we got feedback from rollouts, you have now options to give the key as a value to the function, not load it only from the disk if it's the private key, or take it from the HTTP URL if it's the public one for incoming header. This allows integration with any caching system, so you can keep it in a hash table in Kamailio, you fetch it from there, you pass it to the library, or you can keep it in a Redis, and we have NDB Redis that allows you to get it from that system, and then you pass the value to the library to generate or validate the identity header. Topos got support for context routing and spiraling, was somehow requested in the past, so you can get call coming into this topology stripping system, sent to the main server, comes back to this, the same topology stripping instance. Before was not easy to deploy it, as it was somehow relying only on call ID and looked like being the same call, but actually was a forwarded instance of that one. Now this should work better from this perspective, and you can have a spiraling support to your deployments and protect the topology at the edge, no longer at the core instance. TLS ability to select the outgoing connection. More flexibility especially was needed for better integration with the rigid systems such as Microsoft Teams, to be able to have a multi-domain instance easier. Many new parameters, functions, preprocessor directive, like making a define from an environment variables, also printing the configuration file after evaluation of this if def, if not def. So practically you can see what Kamailio sees for that config. So for troubleshooting, it's quite useful. Logging messages in CE format was added recently, and also checkcam CLI, this control tool for Kamailio, because got a lot of enhancements during the last year. I presented also at the last edition, but more were added, so check it, because you have history suggestion, auto completion, syntax highlighting, and so on. In the past few months since the 5.5 release, we didn't stop. Actually, we are now with 4 new modules. NatS will be presented by Emmanuel in like 40 minutes or so. Ruxik, it's a module that I added to offer alternative to HTTP client, because with some distribution, it proved that the combination of libcurl with libSSL in that distro creates some conflicts, and I wanted to validate or not. And seems that this module works fine on those systems. So if you have troubles with HTTP client module in Kamailio, especially in some older Ubuntu, check if this one suits to you. Today, I just merged Slack. That was recently a pull request. And TLS-A, this is like a pseudo module that practically compiles TLS module as a static linked library with libSSL, which means that Kamailio initialized the libSSL only inside TLS-A module and doesn't impact anymore libcurl or libmysql that also use libSSL behind. More features to existing systems, remote registration lookup by user, enhancements again to the loss module, we'll see both soon. New variables, transformation. You have now like cursor walk through Kamailio headers and Kamailio and SIP message body headers and SIP message body lines. So practically between, you can start from the first header, walk for each of these step. You can get the header name, header value. You can remove that at the current position. You can add before or after new headers. Same with the lines in the body. So you can walk each line in the body of the message, match it against some expression, and then remove it or insert something after, so practically replacing it. So that was what's new. The ecosystem itself, it's practically everything online now since last year in this edition. CamCLI, I already mentioned, got a lot of improvements. Same with SexIPID project that I introduced last year, so check it again. Book, it's still not up to date to the 5.3, and I plan to add the Kemi chapter before having a new release. So let's see how that goes. Summary of the resources, and that's it for me.